right, so I'm going to get us going here. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today on our webinar. I'm Lacey Shaver. I'm the City Renewable Energy Manager here at the World Resources Institute, and I'm one of the staff behind our American Cities Climate Challenge Renewables Accelerator, which is an initiative co-led by WRI and the Rocky Mountain Institute in partnership with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network and with funding support by Bloomberg Philanthropies. So our Renewables Accelerator project here is helping US cities to hit their ambitious renewable energy goals. So we're really excited to have you here today to talk about city clean energy trends from 2020, revealed by new data from our local government Renewables Action Tracker, including some particularly noteworthy city renewable energy deals. We hope to dig a little deeper into these deals today with representatives from 3 of those cities, Houston, Denver, and Madison, including some discussion about how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted their efforts and the role of cities in the clean energy transition moving forward. So first, some housekeeping. There we go. We will start today with a short presentation about our new 2020 data findings from the Renewable Action Tracker. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with the city representatives. We're reserving about 15 minutes or so at the end for Q&A. You can submit your questions anytime during the webinar by entering them into the Q&A box. We'll address as many as we can during our Q&A portion of our agenda, but if a question has a quick answer, our staff may respond immediately. Otherwise, we'll hold all questions for the end. We will be recording this webinar and we will make it available after the presentation. So now to introduce our speakers. Today, we will hear from Yuning Liu, our Senior Associate from RMI's Urban Transformation Program, and Tatsutom Gonçalves, Research Analyst for WRI's Energy Program, both of whom work with me on the Renewables Accelerator Initiative. They are going to tell us a little bit more about the local government renewables action trackers and trends and findings from our 2020 data. Next, we'll hear directly from some of our cities. We will have Laura Cunningham, the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Houston and Chief of Staff for its Administration and Regulatory Affairs Department, Johnny Rogers, Renewable Energy Specialist for the City and County of Denver, and Stacy Reese, Sustainability Program Coordinator for the City of Madison. They will talk about their own experiences advancing renewable energy in their cities, how the COVID-19 pandemic affected those efforts, and what they see ahead for city-led renewable energy in their own localities and beyond. So now I'm going to hand it over to Yuning and Tatsutom.
Thanks, Lacey. Hi, everyone. My name is Yuning Liu. I'm a Senior Associate with RMI. Next slide. So cities are a core driver of climate change, and precisely because they are such big greenhouse gas emitters, local governments can be at the forefront in tackling climate change by leading the switch to clean energy. In the past few years, I'm sure you have seen more and more news reports on US local governments setting very ambitious renewable energy goals. It's exciting to see so many cities and counties making sustainability commitments. But a more important question is, are we on the right track to achieve these goals? Next slide. So what made this extremely challenging is that US local governments are under huge pressure as the world reels from the financial blow of COVID-19. Cities and counties are facing severe budget shortfalls, forcing cuts to crucial spending on education and infrastructure. A December 2020 survey by the National League of Cities found that municipalities' revenues had declined by more than 1/5 since the beginning of the pandemic. Losing critical funds could have seriously hindered US local governments' continued progress on renewable energy. Next slide. However, despite the immense obstacles, US cities and counties bought more renewable energy in 2020 than ever before, according to the latest data from the local government Renewables Action Tracker. So nearly 100 cities and counties across 33 states completed 143 deals, which added 3,683 megawatts of renewable energy capacity. This is a 23% increase from 2019 and represents enough energy to power over 811,000 households per year. Next slide. As a background, the Local Government Renewables Action Tracker is an interactive web tool that RMI and WRI developed to represent clean energy transactions and advocacy efforts announced by US local governments. It consists of 2 parts, a transaction tracker, and an engagement tracker. The one we're discussing today in this webinar is the transaction tracker, which provides an overview of the renewable energy deals announced by cities, municipal utilities, counties, and community choice aggregations since 2015. As you can see on the map, the bigger a circle is, the larger the deal it represents. Different colors stand for different transaction types. Next slide. So local governments in California and Texas have been the leader in renewable energy procurement, and they continue to expand their national lead in 2020. These cities and counties represented 34% of the total number of the deals and 79% of the total deal size in the past year. At the same time, more local governments in the other states bought renewable energy in 2020. The number of these local governments buyers increased from 45 in 2015 to 69 in 2020. Overall, cities and counties across 40 states have procured clean energy since 2015, which shows a national momentum in renewable energy procurement. Next slide, please. So we have summarized 10 of the most noteworthy renewable energy deals announced by US local governments across the country in 2020. And here are their 4 unique features. First of all, 2 deals with record-breaking size were completed last year. Houston signed the biggest solar deal ever announced by US local governments, while Los Angeles signed the biggest wind deal. For local governments that don't have access to large-scale renewable energy projects, they have collaborated with utilities and other local institutions to sign large deals that they could not otherwise. Some examples are Charlotte, North Carolina, a group of Arizona local governments, Arlington County, Virginia, and Nashville, Tennessee. The third feature is that some cities started including social equity considerations in their renewable energy deals, which shows that renewable energy can help local governments meet social and economic goals in addition to their climate goals. For instance, Denver's community solar projects help low and moderate income residents get clean energy, and Madison combined their city on-site solar projects with a long-term job training program. Besides, during the COVID-19 crisis, some local governments and regional authorities have used creative financing approaches to develop renewable energy projects. For example, the transit authority in the DC metro area leased their carports and canopies to private companies to support the development of community solar projects. And Knox County in Maine used federal funds to build its own solar facility. Now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Tom, who will dive into these 10 worthy deals and explain how they can inspire city renewable energy procurement in the future.
Thanks, Yuning, for the overview, and hello, everybody. My name is Tom. I am a research analyst at the World Resources Institute's energy program. And I'd like to spend some time today going over, providing a little bit more detail about the deals highlighted by Yuning as the most noteworthy in our data set. So as Yuning alluded to, 2020 was a record-breaking year. And one of the reasons that was the case was that we saw the biggest solar and wind deals ever signed by US cities last year. For solar, the city of Houston, Texas took the lead with an estimated by signing a deal for an estimated 492 megawatts of solar projects across the state. And just for context, that is the equivalent number, that amount of energy is the equivalent needed to power more than 75,000 or about 90% of Houston's households. And in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reductions, it's the equivalent of planting 12 million trees, enough to pack or about 600 New York City Central Parks. When it comes to wind, Los Angeles, California took the lead there with a 331 megawatt wind project to be sited in New Mexico. And again, for reference, that would be the equivalent amount of energy needed to power more than 200,000 or about 15% of Los Angeles households, and the equivalent to planting 15 million trees in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and which we could fit into just about 800 New York City Central Parks. These two examples are illustrative of an overall positive trend. The average size of local government deals has almost doubled, going from 14 megawatts in 2015 to 26 megawatts in 2020. This trend has been driven largely by bigger and bigger offsite physical power purchase agreement or PPA deals, which are the main mechanism that cities and other buyers have used to purchase large-scale renewable energy offsite. You can see this, the influence from these deals clearly in this graph, with the blue line indicating the increase in the average overall deal size for 2020, and the green line indicating the increase in the physical PPA size. So you can see a great similarity in that trend. Overall, this is great news because power purchase agreements entail agreed upon fixed prices for, agreed upon prices for fixed periods of time, which in turn helps cities better plan for future energy costs. And as Yuning mentioned, there have been lots of local governments coming out in recent years with ambitious climate and renewable energy goals. These deals, due to their sheer size and increasing size, help cities move closer and faster towards those goals. And on a public level, they reflect stronger commitment by those governments to doing so. Now, a second trend that Yuning alluded to was that in cases where cities, physical power purchase agreements are not available everywhere in the country. So some local governments do not have this option. And as a result, they have taken a different route, namely working directly with their electric utilities to gain access to large-scale renewable energy. The city of Charlotte, North Carolina is one such example of a city who purchased 35 megawatts through a green tariff directly with their electric utility, Duke Energy. There's also an example of local governments in Arizona who worked with the utility's Salt River project to gain access to a similar deal, as well as Arlington County in Virginia that worked with Dominion Energy. Now, another way for local governments to engage in regional collaboration is by partnering with local institutions such as corporations and universities or other local governments to leverage their collective buying power to meet climate goals more affordably and more efficiently. One such example is the city of Nashville, Tennessee, that worked with Vanderbilt University to join the Tennessee Valley Authority's Green Tariff Program, building a solar, leading to a 125 megawatt solar farm being built, 100 megawatts of which will go to the city itself. A third theme that we identified in these 10 most noteworthy deals was cities using their renewable energy projects to create local social and economic benefits. One such example is the city of Madison, Wisconsin, which you will be hearing from in a few minutes. They, in 2020, installed a 240 kilowatt solar array in a city facility, which is just one of many projects that they have installed in recent years in city property. Now, in tandem with this effort, and they have also created a job training program that teaches residents with little background in the energy sector to install solar panels. And as a result, those participants of that program have proceeded to install about 80% of the city's on-site solar capacity to date. Another city that fits under this category is Denver, Colorado, that has reserved at least 20% of solar power from 9 upcoming solar projects from low and moderate income residents. And just for reference, they're actually also planning to associate these projects with a job training program. So these are great examples of cities integrating not only renewable energy, pursuing not only renewable energy, but also the creation of local talent and social equity. Lastly, a key theme that we wanted to bring attention to was local governments pursuing creative financing opportunities for renewable energy projects. such as was the case with the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, that leased 13 football fields worth of space at 4 of its rail stations to install just under 13 megawatts of solar on parking lot carports and canopies. This is, by doing so, the authority has created a reliable long-term revenue stream that would have, through real estate that would have otherwise remained an untapped resource. Another example here is Knox County in Maine, which used the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, passed last year by the federal government to fund the installation of a 5 megawatt solar facility next to its regional airport with a projected 70% return on investment. This, the economics of this project will allow the airport to operate more independently from taxpayers' money. So overall, these are great examples, and they fit into categories which we think provide a helpful blueprint for local governments going forward in their renewable energy pursuits. There are plenty of lessons to be drawn here. One being signing larger deals makes for more efficient progress towards the renewable energy goals. Collaborating with regional partners while still a nascent approach is one that holds great promise by offering greater economic and climate benefits. Incorporating job training and social benefits, in turn, ensures that these projects support the local communities and the local economy. And lastly, using creative financing approaches ensures that greater number of projects that would otherwise not have been feasible can actually come to fruition. We are very excited about these numbers and the progress that cities have made. And one particular stat that is pretty, I find very compelling, is that deals from 2010 corresponded to about 9% of the amount of renewables that the United States needs to install every year between now and 2025 to stay within a 2-degree increase. This is a remarkable contribution, and all the more reason for local governments to keep up the momentum and remain undaunted in their push for a cleaner, more sustainable world after COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Tatsutam and Yuning. I am always so amazed when I go into the tracker and get to see all of the great deals and actions that are currently being taken by cities across the US. So I definitely encourage everyone on this call to go check out cityrenewables.org. So now we're going to switch gears a bit and hear directly from 3 of our cities, Houston, Denver, and Madison. So with us today, we have Laura Cottingham. She is the Chief of Staff of the Administration and Regulatory Affairs Department and Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Houston. Laura has been with the City of Houston for almost 7 years, and she oversees the city's portfolio of sustainability initiatives, including its renewable energy work, and plays a key role as liaison for these efforts with the media, city council, industry stakeholders, and customers. Then we also have with us Johnny Rogers. He is the Renewable Energy Specialist in the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency for the City and County of Denver. Johnny has been with Denver for 2.5 years, or 2 years, and leads Denver's efforts to achieve its goal of achieving 100% renewable electricity community-wide by 2030 as part of Denver's 80 by 50 climate action plan. And then finally, we have Stacy Reese. She is the Sustainability Program Coordinator for the City of Madison. She has been with the city for 2.5 years, where she is working to help the city build a more sustainable and resilient community, including advancing the city's effort to achieve 100% renewable energy and net zero carbon by 2030 as part of the 100% renewable Madison report. So now I'd like to get us started, perhaps with a question for Laura in Houston. So Tatsutam mentioned that last year, Houston announced an offsite physical power purchase agreement that amounts to an estimated 492 megawatts, which is around 1 terawatt hour of solar. Wow. This is the largest renewable project ever announced by a city in the US. Could you tell us a little bit more about how the city got to the terms in this deal, particularly its size, and what this means for Houston in meeting its renewables goals?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for the opportunity to join y'all today. this is one of my favorite things to talk about when we talk about climate, when we talk about sustainability in Houston, because it's something that people are so surprised to hear about. Almost every time we talk about it, someone says, oh my goodness, I had no idea that the city of Houston, this energy capital of the world, we are a traditional oil and gas town. How is it possible that you could use more renewable energy than any other city in the country, right? That there's still kind of this like mental mindset that you couldn't possibly do both. But when you think about it, the energy capital of the world is exactly the place where this should be happening. We have a lot of big energy cities in the US, and you see this happening in cities all across the US. And so investing in renewable energy, making that commitment to 100% renewable energy as one of Mayor Turner's pillars of the Houston Climate Action Plan that came out almost a year ago. And the real reason why our our retail electric contract is so big is because Houston is so big and we use so much energy, right? We are proud to be the #1 city in terms of what we use, but that is a title we would gladly give up once we also balance it out with our energy efficiency, right? Once we start reducing our actual consumption. And so the city of Houston has historically been investing in renewable energy over time for several years, going back several mayors. And we've been increasing it over time as the cost of energy of renewables comes down. Because in Houston, sustainability is important to us environmentally, but it's also important to us economically. And so everything has to be a smart financial decision. So we've seen that increase over and over year after year. We've looked at purchasing renewables different ways. We have a 50 megawatt PPA out in Alpine, Texas. We have looked at developing renewables closer in within the city of Houston. And then as it happens, we released the Climate Action Plan in April of last year with a goal of 100% renewable within the next 5 years. And believe it or not, in the middle of the pandemic, a week later, we announced that we had moved to 100% renewable 5 years earlier than anticipated. And that was really just a result of timing, prices coming down, so much renewable energy coming on in the Houston and Texas region in ERCOT, that it was incredibly affordable. Competitive, it actually saves City of Houston about $9 million a year compared to our previous contract. So it was a fabulous offer. It's really important, I want to point out that because we were in a deregulated electricity market, everybody knows about ERCOT now. The City of Houston purchases power for municipal operations, not the entire city. And we have to purchase through a retail electric partner. So it is not a direct PPA. There is not a 500 megawatt facility being built, but it's sleeved within to our contract. And so our existing PPA is sleeved within that, and additional facilities are plans that will keep being layered on top of that to cover our entire portfolio. And we can go into more details there because I love talking about this.
That's great. Maybe we'll come back in the next round so that we can have a little bit of time to hear from our others. Thanks so much, Laura. Now I'd like to hear from Johnny in Denver. So last year, y'all announced a project that's going to bring on around 5 megawatts of community solar. What's really great about this particular project is that it was designed to make the solar energy accessible to low and moderate income households. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program, how it's being rolled out, and about the thinking that went into designing a program that really centers on equitable clean energy access?
Sure. Thanks so much, Lacey, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to talk today. So I think I'll kind of start with, the thinking of why did we take this approach and why community solar was right for Denver. So we are not in a deregulated market. We've got a vertically integrated regulated monopoly utility provider, Xcel Energy, and they're actually doing great work. I spend a lot of my time advocating at the Public Utilities Commission to see how can we push them to go farther, faster. Yesterday, they just filed their electric resource plan that actually will set us on a trajectory for 80% renewables by 2030. So when we think about Denver's role in the energy transition, we really look at where can we add more renewable capacity to the system, how can we do it in a way that really prioritizes local investment and community benefits? And how do we try to do this in a structure that's going to be economically viable for the city? So even pre-COVID, as we were looking around and thinking, what are our options to get more renewables built, I was expecting that we would have zero budget to do it. And fortunately, there's a pretty robust community solar market in Colorado, where there are private investors who will pay to build community solar projects in the state, but they're running out of places to put it. So we recognize that we've got large municipal rooftops, we've got parking lots that can accommodate covered parking with solar, we've got space out by our airport that can put in ground mount tracking systems. And so we actually put the challenge out to the community solar developer community and said, we will give you the opportunity to build community solar projects on our property, and we'll buy back the electricity if you can do it in a way that saves the city money, dedicates a portion of the power to help low-income members of the community, and creates job opportunities and other community benefits. So that actually attracted about a dozen community solar developers to bid on this opportunity, demonstrate what their community impact programs would be, come up with a portfolio of options that would be the most attractive to the city in advancing both our clean energy and community objectives. And best yet, they would pay for all the design work, they would pay for all the planning, they would help us evaluate the sites that we had available, knowing that we were committed to moving this program forward. If they could check all those boxes, we would say, yeah, we'll buy 30 million kilowatt hours of electricity from you every year. So that became an attractive enough incentive to really drive interest in this program and get us to where we are today, where we now have 9 projects that have been approved by Xcel Energy. We're working through the design phase now, and we're shifting our contracts where instead of doing the power purchase agreement approach, which would have been a great way for Denver to move forward at this at no upfront cost to the city, we've actually identified opportunities for the city to make investments to own these projects ourselves, which will end up saving us a lot of money over the long run. 20% of the power will go back to low-income members of the community. 10% of the workforce will be job training. And everywhere that we do a solar carport in a community solar project in a neighborhood, we'll co-locate with electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And the last layer on top of this is a partnership with Denver Public Schools to try to bring clean energy activities into the classroom, create internship opportunities for students, and work with teachers so that they can use these solar projects that we're building as learning tools and hopefully help to inspire the next generation of climate leaders.
Wow, I always love hearing about all of the different aspects that you've incorporated into one program and project, and how you're just really trying to think about tying those different pieces together and bringing different elements of the community together. So now I think we want to hear from Stacy a little bit more about what y'all have going on in Madison, where you completed 2 projects last year amounting to 268 kilowatts of on-site solar. So beyond this effort really advancing the city's on-site goals, what's even more interesting is that a unique long-term training program was built directly into the projects. Could you tell us a little bit more about the project and what the city is aiming to do by integrating clean energy and job training?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me here today and representing the city of Madison. So in 2016, the engineering division of the city of Madison implemented a solar job training pilot program called Green Power. The goals set out by the Green Power pilot program were to increase the city's generation of renewable energy, decrease the city's carbon footprint, and provide job training opportunities. And the Green Power program, it really aims to bring people of color, women, and other underrepresented groups into the solar industry and to help diversify the trades. We're also trying to create job opportunities for historically marginalized groups in our community. So in 2020, just as last year, the city achieved a milestone of 1 megawatt of on-site solar installed, with about 80% of that being installed by our Green Power trainees. And that solar production overall will offset about 950 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions per year. So now the city is planning to install the next megawatt over the next 2 years. And then starting in 2023, the city will install nearly 1 megawatt each year going forward. And the 2021 Green Power Training Crew just started last week. So if you want to check out, we just loaded a video to the City of Madison's engineering Facebook page, interviewing the current trainees and getting them to start their journey on the rooftops.
Great, thanks, Stacy. So now I just kind of want to perhaps go around for one or two. So each of your cities took a really unique approach to advancing renewable energy. Could you talk a little bit about what local factors drove your city to take the approach that you did? I know some of you touched on it lightly. And were there any other factors at the state or federal level that influenced those decisions?
Happy to go first. So I think, as I mentioned, we looked around to see, where was there active investment being made in renewables in Colorado that we had an opportunity to align with and present ourselves as a partner for folks to make that investment in our community. So the community solar program really stood out as a way to, get other people to pay for something that would really benefit us and our local community members. And because of the way community solar is structured, we can more efficiently share that power between both our city facilities and local members of the community. And just in terms of thinking about it, why we took the approach that we did, trying to figure out how do we have as many wins as possible, as many different organizations kind of being able to feel invested in this, part of it, and bought into the same vision. Our utility wins because they're required by law to procure community solar projects in Colorado, and they'd much rather, I think, support the type of program that we're doing than some of the other options that are available. Our city council members are excited to see projects getting built in the neighborhoods of their constituents. Our community advocacy groups are excited to see job opportunities and programs with students. Our budget office is excited to see somebody else paying for this, or a business plan that's able to put together to actually save the city money on our bills. Our climate office is excited because it advances our clean energy goals. So I think that was the thinking. How do we check as many of those boxes as we can? We're fortunate the state has a renewable energy grant program that we applied to and received a $1 million award that helps us really set up this program. It's the first time we've attempted something like this, the first time we've really seen this type of structure implemented around the country. So having that $1 million, it's only probably 10% of the overall project cost, even less than that for the first 5 megawatts that we're building, but it goes a really long way in helping with the economics and helping us try something new. Federally, there hasn't really been anything yet, but we're very excited about the direction of this new administration, and hopefully programs will be coming out that continue to support our efforts.
I hope so too.
So I will piggyback off of that because Houston in many ways is kind of opposite, right? That our program is structured because that is the only way that we had, right? That we don't have a lot of those options. And so given a little narrow lane that we have to operate in, we have to find a way to pull in all of those benefits, right? And so one of the things that we really learned, the city puts our electricity contract out to bid every so often, so several years go by, is how important it was to communicate all of those benefits and all of that value that Denver talked about really well, right? To Houston. And again, sometimes that's surprising, but talk about how it is a climate goal. Talk about how, as this energy capital of the world and this energy transition that's happening, that this has to be incorporated in what we're all doing. And what we saw was that the more the city got out there and talked about this and explained that this was one of Mayor Turner's goals. This is something the city of Houston has led on, and we're going to continue to lead on. More and more of the retail providers started to providing more. And that is what's so important to me, to the city of Houston, because once the city of Houston is 100%, that's fabulous, but we are about 6% of the entire community. And so our next big challenge is how do we get everyone else to join us on their own? And that takes a lot of communicating those benefits and that value. And so seeing our utility partners joining in, creating programs that make it easier and more affordable for single family homeowners, but also like big corporate enterprises that we have a lot of in Houston, showing that you can be a large industrial user and use renewable energy is fabulous across the board.
All very great points, and I love thinking through how we communicate this to different folks and how we bring others along. You know, I think cities have a real unique voice in being able to spur some of this action, and you know, I think it's just great. Stacy?
Yeah, I'll just add in a little bit. You know, Wisconsin's a little different than, or Madison, Wisconsin's a little different than Denver and Houston. So, you know, our goal for 1 megawatt by 2020 was followed by a resolution passed in 2017, setting a goal for 100% renewable energy and net zero carbon for city operations and the community as a whole. But Wisconsin's a regulated energy state and has not made a determination on third party. Municipalities also have levy limits, so which heavily affect our operating budget. So we really, with low interest rates and favorable credit rating, really focused on our capital side for renewable energy procurement. And then thinking a little bit more on our local goals, you know, diversity and inclusion is a really strong value here at the City of Madison. So the Green Power program is developed with this in mind. And in the 5 years since the program's beginning, the city's engineering division has hired and trained 15 people, 11 which were people of color and 5 which were women.
Yeah, it's definitely, when you look at city action across the board on renewables, you know, I think you'll see how different it can be, local flavors, depending on what regulatory context you have, what your state legislation enables. And so I think that's one of the struggles our team has seen, is that cities really have to understand their local context and then figure out the solutions that they have available to them and how to make those work for them to hit their goals. So another question here. So over the last 5 years or so, you know, we've really witnessed incredible growth in city commitments to renewable energy and these new projects that are moving forward because of that. I think my numbers here say that since 2015, the projects alone have totaled around 12,800 megawatts, which is enough energy to power 2.8 million households. Over 180 local governments across the country are now on the record committing to going 100% renewable. So I'd like to hear from y'all. What do you see as the role of cities in leading the energy transition going forward, particularly with respect to federal re-engagement on climate action? And what is that really unique role or ability that a local government can contribute to our collective effort? Anyone like to take that one? Laura?
So I will give you a Houston perspective. And I think I will probably speak for almost every city who's involved in renewable energy about how excited we are to have a federal partner again, who is not just talking about this, but really like leading from day one on renewable energy. I know that my boss right now is in a press conference talking about the new infrastructure plan and all of the climate and all of the renewable and all of the electric vehicle, all of the provisions that it has that can support what we're working on. That this is such a role for mayors and cities. Mayor Turner is chair of a group called Climate Mayors, and that's exactly what mayors are working on right now. Madison is nodding that they're a co-chair. Denver's on the steering committee, I believe, as well. That our mayors are working together for the past couple of years, kind of on our own, right? Cities have been leading the charge. We are impacted by climate change. We're the boots on the ground or the boats in the water, and so we've been doing everything we can, and now we have this amazing opportunity to move toward advocacy and to say, hey, here's what we've been doing and here's what we need a little help with, or here's how we can help your goals be achieved faster. And so it's just a really neat time. And I also love that we have some mayors who are now in the federal administration, right? Mayor Pete is now Secretary Pete. Mayor Walsh from Boston is out there talking about energy jobs every single day. That you are seeing mayors advocating at the federal level, and you're seeing the federal folks advocating for mayors. And I think that's just great.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning Mayor Rhodes Conway being a new co-chair. And that was actually because of the mayor movement to the federal administration. But yeah, when I think of that, I think of that scale and urgency. It's been mentioned here before, but with our 25 plus installations of city-owned solar, it's only about 2.5% of our electricity consumption, and that's not even including our natural gas and transportation fossil fuel consumption. And that's only city operations. Then you scale out to the community-wide goals that we have for 100% renewable net zero carbon. So the size and pace of what is needed demands a collaborative approach that includes all levels. Local governments have taken the lead. So now we need a collective effort to scale up and accelerate our actions. And with the limitations at the local level, I'm really highly encouraged by seeing federal movement towards a 100% renewable future.
Yeah, and I'll just, I guess, wrap up this question by saying I really see cities as the implementers. We are the boots on the ground. We are the front lines of climate change that are going to be dealing with a lot of this stuff, and our residents and businesses are going to be directly affected by everything that happens. But the decisions that we make, I like to think about it, how can we influence or control the systems that we're a part of? What are those levers that we can pull? At least in Denver and Colorado, cities can set their own building codes. So, how do we work building codes in such a way that really advance our agenda and do so in a way that ensures that the transition will be equitable and won't disproportionately burden the folks who have borne the brunt of pollution and climate change and systemic inequities already? How do we make sure that the programs that we're creating, the way that we invest in our energy infrastructure really solves community problems, but does so in a way that benefits the climate? And just thinking about all of the infrastructures that we are a part of and that we touch, all of the dollars that we spend in just the normal operation of government, how do we adjust the status quo so that we're really creating a not just environmentally sustainable, but also economically and socially sustainable cities and communities that will last us for generations to come? I think that's the vision.
Thanks all. Definitely very inspiring there. And I agree with y'all, as cities are where the rubber meets the road on a lot of this, and the innovation labs. So I'm hoping to see a lot more funding coming from the federal level as well that can kind of come down and help y'all continue to make progress towards your goals. So one last question before we get to a bunch of the great questions that we have coming in the Q&A. So what would be your biggest piece of advice to a city that maybe hasn't started yet on a renewable energy project or is in the very early stages of planning their renewables efforts?
I can go real quick.
Yeah.
One of the biggest takeaways I'd say is setting goals first. We set our first goal for 1 megawatt by 2020, and we passed the resolution for 100% renewable. So either by press release or proclamation, goals help cities set their North Star, and it's followed by the planning process on how to get there. So you can't have a roadmap without a destination, right? So goals can outlive changes at institutions such as staff, budgets, and political wins.
I think as we talked about a bit so far, really understanding what programs are available to you, whether they're allowed by statute or, just your utility construct, what they offer. And, are those going to be sufficient to help you achieve your goals? Or are there things that you need to do to advocate for changes or ways to recreate them so that you can make meaningful progress? And then I'm certainly biased in kind of my advice to cities, see what you can do locally. See what investments you can make that are going to go directly back into your community. At least from our experience, that's where we're seeing really positive results and reactions from the people that we represent.
I would go back to, in addition to what everyone has said, communicating the benefits, the co-benefits, the things that maybe don't come to top of mind to me, because I know my team is hyper focused on greenhouse gas emissions and that inventory and getting those numbers down. And that is not what everyone else cares about. But they might care about reducing their energy burden. They might care about backup generation and what happens when the grid goes down. And they might care about air quality and the connection between air quality and community health, which is so important right now during COVID. There are all different types of reasons why this is important. And sometimes what is interesting to one person might not catch their eye, but something else might. And being able to bring that full menu forward, and as well internally with your finance departments, right, with your city managers and all of the folks who have to approve. We found that really helpful to be able to communicate a broad range of value, not just that this is a part of our climate strategy, even though that it is, you know, a huge part of what we're working on.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. So now I am going to turn to some of the questions that have come in through the Q&A. So keep them coming. We'll try to get through as many as we can. We've got a lot of really good ones in here for both our city presenters, but and also for the WRI RMI tracker team as well. So perhaps the first one I'm going to direct to Laura here. I think everyone has had all eyes on Texas in the last couple months. And so we had a question asking how y'all are looking at resilience in light of the February grid collapse.
Yes, I'm sorry to say that we are once again in the climate spotlight. Every single person is looking at resilience and looking at climate right now. We are in our legislative session, meets every other year for 6 months, and I have never seen so many climate bills. And folks don't even know that they're climate bills, right? But they're talking about how for the first time ever, we need to factor climate into our state grid. And what's really sad is that we're also now adding in to our own personal and municipal operations, what to do if that grid is not available, and how do we have a backup, and how do we maybe have a backup for that backup. And what is also really exciting is that there's a lot of new technology that is now either in play or is going to come into play in the near term that could really change things. And so the city of Houston is looking at how do we harden our entire system, because we had situations where fire stations and police stations lost power or lost water. And our public works department was working around the clock to keep everything running for days. We don't ever want to be in that situation again. But how do we look at all of the different types of technology and pilot them and find out what works best for different use cases? We've got giant buildings, we've got small buildings, we've got animal shelters, we've got human shelters, right? Like, we can truly be a laboratory to see what works and what doesn't. There's also a lot of legislative policy discussion going on about what is working in Texas right now, what historically has worked, what has not worked, and just the fact that we very much have to actually factor climate change into everything as aggressively as possible, because we have seen a catastrophic infrastructure fail and no one wants that to happen.
For sure. And I know we all feel really bad for everyone who is really impacted by that. And so we also hope that this is really just catalyzes some action to make sure that we don't end up in this position again going forward. So now I've got a question that this might be for Yuning from RMI. Why is there a sudden increase in the megawatts purchased from the data in the tracker beginning in 2018 after a couple years of kind of flat development?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are two main reasons. The first one is that the spike came not long after federal government's June 2017 announcement of its intended withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. So that event actually spurred many subnational governments to commit to formal climate and renewable energy goals. And another reason is that there's a continued decrease in the cost of renewable energy and electricity. So both reasons, the implementation of these goals and also combined with the declining cost of renewable electricity caused a growing interest in local government's renewable energy procurement.
Thanks, Yuning. And maybe another quick one for you or Tatsutam. How are average PPAs so much larger than average production? Are the units the same or somehow different?
I can take that. Yes, the units are the same. The difference is that PPAs are often located offsite, so they space tends to be very limited in urban areas. You can place solar panels on roofs, but wind is really hard just due to the makeup of wind in cities, and so it tends to be piecemeal whenever it's installed on site. Whereas if you're placing a project offsite in an open field, you can go almost as big as you can. And so as a result, power purchase agreements tend to be just larger by default, just because of the geography of it.
Thank you. So back to our city speakers here. I've got a question about if your cities are doing anything on storage and also on energy efficiency projects for low-income communities. So I don't know if you each want to kind of go around and answer if you're doing any storage or energy efficiency work.
Yeah, so we're starting to explore that. It's one of those things where storage programs don't really exist yet in Colorado in our service territory. So step one is go to the Public Utilities Commission and advocate and try to build coalitions with stakeholders and with the utility to say, what would a storage program look like? What is the value that that battery can add back to the system so that a customer who installs it can actually be compensated for that value and not just have it for the resiliency benefit. We're also very fortunate when looking at the outage history of our various facilities. I was actually thinking about going after a FEMA grant to turn the Colorado Convention Center into a big microgrid. It's had 4 power outages in the last 20 years. So that's great, but it also made us not a very good candidate to go for this FEMA resiliency grant. But we are thinking about it. We're hoping these programs start to roll out. And as we look at our shelters and other city facilities and critical operations, how can storage play a role? We've got 2 pilots that we're working on with Xcel Energy. One's a microgrid out at the airport to ensure that some critical facilities there will operate in perpetuity, and the others at our National Western Events Complex that would enable that to avoid outages and act as an emergency evacuation shelter that could accommodate both people and animals in a crisis event. I forget the other part of the question, or energy efficiency and low-income housing. Yes, we have a lot of attention on that, and we're actually working on some programs now. Denver was really fortunate this past election cycle. Our taxpayers voted for a 0.25% sales tax increase to establish our climate protection fund, which will be about a $40 million annual fund that'll be managed by our Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. And one of the core permitted uses of that is increasing the energy efficiency of people's homes, and specifically looking at income qualified, environmental justice, and other communities that have been traditionally disadvantaged.
Yeah, and I just add really quickly that our engineering operations team is actually working on a pretty cool project this year, combining solar, EV charging, and battery storage to work on managed charging, and our green power trainees will be involved in that project. We also have some groups in town working on NOAA, which is the naturally occurring affordable housing stock in our community for energy efficiency measures, as well as public health measures. So we're looking to partner with them going forward, which is really exciting.
So all things energy efficiency have kind of come to the top, which is really important. It is sad that a lot of this came about as a result of the freeze and this kind of tragedy that before, when I want to talk about weatherization and building envelopes, that's not always the most exciting topic of conversation, but really important. And that's kind of showed why that in Houston, we had 50,000 homes whose pipes burst. And basically it was another flood, right? Another type of flood that we didn't think was possible, another type of damage that folks are dealing with. And so we're working a lot around energy efficiency, around guides for homeowners to know what can they do to make their homes more resilient, around weatherization funding, what is existing and available, and lobbying for potential for more weatherization funding, but also being able to combine that with just basic home repair, because we have a lot of homes that have so much damage from Harvey, from the Memorial Day flood, from the tax day flood, that they don't even qualify yet. And so we've got to bring everyone up, and that's part of Mayor Turner's Complete Communities program that we're really focused on. And then going back to that topic of piloting every possible type of microgrid, looking at storage where we can. It's tricky because the city can't own generation. We can't sell power back. but our utilities are looking to actively partner, which is new and an exciting and innovative step in the right direction.
Thank you so much. Maybe I will direct this one to Stacy first, but for city departments where buy-in was difficult due to shortage of budgets or other kind of buy-in, what were some ways you were able to change the outcome of conversations or get people bought in?
I think, I keep harking back to setting goals, but sometimes the goals, like I said, they kind of outlive, attitudes and conversations around how to get there. And so I think also having support at the budgetary level has been really helpful. But also, I think Laura mentioned before the communication of all the co-benefits. And so we start seeing some of the co-benefits within our own operations and cost savings on our utility bills, and also just the community support around it. So I think all of those pieces kind of played into helping us stay on track.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one last question. And so I'm going to end on this one here from our three city speakers. What are some of the most significant strategic barriers or needs that your city is currently facing regarding renewable energy initiatives? And what are the most effective ways for community members to get involved and contribute? So kind of a big one to end on there, but Johnny?
Yeah, so when we look at Denver's renewable energy mix, only 1% comes from distributed solar right now. The rest really just comes from the grid. And so when I see that, that's a missed opportunity where we have a lot of untapped potential. We have 300 days of sunshine in Denver, and it's really figuring out, how do you take advantage of the space that you have available as a municipality? What partnerships can you form to get more renewables deployed in your communities? And creating accessibility for the members of your community is extremely challenging. Now, we have ways in which we can help facilitate homeowners who can afford the upfront cost of solar to get it on their roof and put together the package for them where they'll save $10,000 plus on their utility bills over the lifetime of that system. But overcoming those upfront access to capital challenges is extremely difficult. We think our community solar program is one way in which we can help to connect residents who can't afford the upfront cost of solar or don't have space on their roof to go solar to help connect them to renewables. But that's not the silver bullet. There need to be more solutions. We're constantly looking at peer cities and others to figure out, what else can we do? And as our utility embarks on this plan to go 80% renewable by 2030, how do we make sure that more of those investments that are going to be utility directed end up coming back into Denver? So really trying to influence the trajectory of those systems level investments. Where are the gigawatts going to go? How do we create more distributed based programs and really try to connect the members of our community to that? If anyone has ideas, I would love if you could reach out and contact us. We're always trying to learn.
I'll just say very similarly, Houston has huge solar potential. And one of our biggest challenges is that electricity is very, very cheap here right now. And so the additional cost of rooftop solar is a challenge, and it is even more of a challenge on our low income and vulnerable communities. And so the folks who need it most are the hardest to bring that clean energy to. The city doesn't have control over the utility, and so we're struggling to find partners. But so very similarly, if someone wants to partner with us and help make that happen, we are absolutely here. We are actively looking at innovative ways, workarounds. How could we try to make the numbers work out a little bit better, bring those costs down?
Real quickly, I'll just add in, in addition to what everyone has said here today, really at the end of the day, my goal with our 100% renewable and net zero carbon for the community wide is that every resident can walk over to their light switch, flip it on, and get what they want. So I think it's really about building coalitions across sectors to help make that push that's needed to get there.
All right, thank you so much to Stacy, Laura, and Johnny for sharing your city's experience, and to Yuning and Tatsutom for telling us more about the tracker. I hope y'all were as inspired today as I was. We will be circulating the recording afterwards, and it's available on the WRI website. You should also go check out cityrenewables.org to see more information on all of these city stories, other city stories, and to dive into the data on the tracker. So thank you so much for your time and attention today, and take care.